Hey, Eric Bach here, your host of the Look Great Naked podcast, and today I bring on Luka Hocevar, coach, ex-ball player, educator, and gym owner of the world-famous Vigor Underground Fitness and Performance Center. Luka is one of the top coaches in the world. He's been instrumental not only in my success, but being a thought leader in the industry for over 2 decades. You can find more about Luka at Luka Hocevar, Hocevar, on Instagram and directly on YouTube. Now, in this conversation, we hit a number of topics, with the primary one being how to become an athlete again. You see, many people with athletic backgrounds and pasts really struggle to get dialed in with their health and performance for the long term. They run into injuries. They run into issues in terms of mindset. They may not be able to adapt their training around all the other stressors that they have directly in their life. And for many people, this leads to feeling like a failure, like you're not quite meeting the expectations for what you have been before and what you possibly could be again. And so we dig in both into the mindset aspect of coming from an athletic background, but also the importance of incorporating athletic principles directly into the training that you do, because it's not just about being able to perform like an athlete when you're competitive. Being able to perform like an athlete, to be agile, to be nimble, to have conditioning, to be able to put your foot out in front of you, these are all crucial things that lead you to not only be able to look your best, but perform your best and stay healthy with your life over the long term. Also, we dig into a few major industry issues in terms of how people are so polarizing today in order to try to make a point, and how it's actually hurting people when it comes to helping people be able to transform their life through fitness. So you are going to absolutely love this episode. As you're watching, hey, do us a favor, drop us over a link, whether you're catching on Spotify, watching on YouTube, on Apple, whatever it is, share that directly on your Instagram stories, tag me at Bach Performance and Luka, Luka Hocevar, if you're enjoying this episode, and I will select one person, drop them a nice gift over from my friends over at Legion Athletics so you can take your training to the next level. Let's hit it. Cover a couple things today. I want to talk about first unlocking your human potential, because you are somebody who, I've come to know as a high performer. You do not cut corners. You do things the right way. You commit to excellence and you make it happen. Also, I love your overall perspective in terms of training, how to maintain and become an athlete again. I think that's something that's really unique that you do. Whereas, we see a lot of ebbs and flows in the fitness industry where people will go, just kind of hop on the trend, right? Everyone's a freaking low volume Mike Mentzer fan right now. Like that's what it is, which, not necessarily a bad thing, but like you're true to who you are and you're still diverse within your belief system to be able to know and grow and be able to go from that point. And so what we talk a lot about specifically is how to look great naked without living in the gym. Performance is always a huge piece of that, but also the benefits of obviously being able to look, feel, and perform your best, because we all know that can transcend and jump into so many different areas of overall human development and improvement. So does that sound cool?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll riff on this all day. I get fired
awesome,
up
dude.
That. Yeah,
man, you're a lifelong athlete. Tell me about the basketball days.
I mean, there's a lot to say there, but I'm gonna try to encapsulate as much as I can. Ball was funny because I think the first time I started playing basketball was I'm probably like 7 years old. I did this basketball camps. There was a guy in Slovenia. His name is Juris Dos, who's like a legend. He had these basketball camps, and I'd go. Here's the funny part about it, right? Everybody will say stuff like, "Oh, you fell in love with the sport." I was a scrawny little short kid. I'm from the Balkans. If you look at like people from the Balkans, they're very tall. Like when you look at the league and you got Nikola Jokic and Doncic and Zurich and all these guys, and so it basically I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. How I became. I always tell this story of if anybody's read the book "Be So Good They Can't Ignore You," right, by Cal Newport, and he talks about the passion hypotheses. Well, basketball was that for me. It wasn't like I just fell in love with ball. It was almost like I had a chip on my shoulder because I didn't get picked. I was the shortest kid. I wasn't that good, and it pissed me off. And and I worked really hard. And the harder I worked, the better I became. That's what got me more passionate about the sport, which is what I think happens with most skills, most things that you do. But that became a big. I got really serious about it at like about 11 years old. Practice every day. I went to this team at 12 called Olympia, which was the best team in the country. And in Europe, everything is like junior teams. It's not like the US where you play for high school basketball or AAU obviously now, but like it's, let's say there's a pro team, then there's a under 18, under 16, right? Like there's under XYZ age teams. And that's really where the best competition happens. And same thing, from that age, I played on the best team, but I had to fight tooth and nail to make it to even the the 12, right? Like, oh, this is the 12 that's going to play for the national championships because that team would win every year. And, I would literally like kill myself just being like in the 12, and then you'd work hard, like, man, I want to get more minutes. I want to get more minutes. So that was kind of like the process, but ball really was a big part of my life. I'll actually interject like where fitness came into it because it's a cool story. So my mom at age 13, when I was 13, opened a gym and with her friend, and she'd work at the bank half the day, and then she'd be done with the bank. She'd go and run the gym. Her friend would run in the morning. And that's when I started lifting weights. And I had some, really, I would say, only thing I could call is luck, I guess. One of the top powerlifters in the country would train there. It was a little small, like 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet. And it was at the top of this partisan building, which in Europe, you have these physical education buildings, gymnastics at the bottom, basketball, all that stuff. And really small, but this guy would teach me how to lift. Like, and obviously he was phenomenally good at it. And another thing was that there was two guys at the bottom of the building that had a little gymnastics gym. And one of them was Elias Pagan, which was like 5-time world champion in the straddle in gymnastics. We're talking about best of the best of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And they'd slide up. And if you ever seen gymnastics guys, right, they're jacked out of their mind, right? So like I would be like, whoa, I knew who he was too, but it's like, whoa, like I want to look like that. And same thing, those guys would give me tips on training. And so I fell in love with it. I started training. But the thing that at that point in time, all I wanted to do was like be a better basketball player, faster, stronger. I want to dunk. I want to, do like, I wanted performance, right? It wasn't like, oh, I'm into fitness because I want to be a coach someday.
Yeah.
And it did. It really improved my performance. I put on muscle. I didn't get slower, which in those days, basketball players would think that if you lift, you get slower.
Yeah.
And, they're like, damn, like, oh, you can touch the rim now. Holy crap. Like you're up 10 pounds. What are you doing? And so that gave me confidence. It gave me, gusto, it got me even more riled up. I felt like I had a little bit of a secret that they didn't. And I started studying. Like, I mean, I'm like 13, 14, 15, and I'm reading like everything you can imagine. I'm talking about like, when Elite FTS came out, and I bought, Charlie Francis Speed Trap, and then eventually was T Nation. I was reading hours per day and buying Tudor Bompa and Zatsiorsky and Verhoshansky books. I'm 15, 16 years old. And it was all from like, okay, like I want to get even better at performance. I want to be more conditioned. Like, so I really geeked out about it. And it's kind of like where I would say the underlying fitness things started happening for me.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, if you ask me what you want to do, everything would be like pro ball, NBA, pro ball, NBA. That's all I cared about, right? In basketball, for me was, there's this kind of other part of this story where between those ages, I was a pretty big knucklehead. I mean, I was doing a lot of dumb stuff. I was in the streets. I was a criminal, and I mean, I kind of went to school some, like just enough, but it was streets and basketball, and basketball really actually, saved my life. I say it to this day. If I didn't have that, and if I didn't have such a strong pull towards the sport, and my coach giving me, I would say, when I say ultimatums, is like, hey, if you come late to practice, I know what you're doing, like you're not going to play, I don't know where I would have been, man. So ball was a big part for me, and I ended up going to college in the US, and part of that decision was to get away from some of the things that I was doing. I did 4 years. I did 2 years in upstate New York, junior college. And then I did 2 years in Southern Virginia, a full-time scholarship. And then from there, I went and played overseas for about 3 years in Ukraine and Slovenia, even in the NBA Summer Pro League. So that, that's a really short kind of timeline of it. And that's what led me. I'll finish on this note on that story, is that we basically opened the gym in Slovenia now over 17 years ago. So I was I started training people when I was still playing pro sports, and eventually I went to my brother. I said, hey, we got something here. There was no gyms like that in the country, meaning coaching gyms, right? There was only big box gyms. We opened up a little small space. We did, body weight, kettlebells, barbells, like really basic stuff. We didn't really have any money. Went into a 470 square foot room, started making it happen. And again, we to this day, I think most people agree, like we've been around for 17 plus years, number one gym in the country in what we do. And that's how that journey began. And I left because I got married to my wife, who was, my ex-wife now, but like who lived in Renton. And so moved, started from scratch, LA Fitness, big box gym training. And, we can dive down that storyline. But now to actually this week is 15 years of Vigor Ground in Seattle. It's been a journey, man.
No doubt. Well, I think the beautiful thing about this journey, and you had me laughing a little bit because like a lot of these same like parallels remind me of the reason that I really got into training and coaching. It was a lot of it was I just wanted to play football, and I was a small kid. I remember getting ran over. I remember feeling like I wasn't good enough. I remember a coach telling me at one point, I'm not a good enough athlete. And so I'm like, you know what? Like mentally, I'm like, fuck that. I'm going to show you. Like that's my mindset with it. And so I started nerding out in everything that I could. And you mentioned this great coach, the powerlifting coach who was able to, or powerlifter.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're seeing the way that these guys move weight and optimize technique and all these different things. I remember seeing, one of my first at a local YMCA, there's these three huge power lifters. I'm like 12, 13 years old. They're getting slapping each other in the back, squatting a house, all this stuff. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm like 100 pounds at the point. And then very fortunate at my high school at this point, I think I was like 14 years old. One of my coaches had forearms like an absolute like steel cables, man. He was a longtime seasoned Olympic lifter. When these guys just have that density, like there's not an ounce of body fat, very much built like a gymnast, except way bigger traps. That immediately for me, I was like, wait, he's not training like a bodybuilder. He's training like for this performance thing. And this is what I need to become more explosive. So I got hooked into doing all these performance lifts, like clean snatches, box jumps, all these different things that most people weren't doing. They were just doing like, BFS, 5x5, whatever at that point.
Yep.
And it just got me so hooked into it. And you just got me thinking of like that early exposure that you had first to athletics, but then other people who were excelling in fitness and really setting that foundation for you. You mentioned the gym opening up and being in there consistently and like really building that foundational thing. And it makes such a big difference in terms of the way that people can build these long-term habits and the passion for physical activity, whether they're trying to perform the way that they want or not.
I think, well, there's an attachment to, again, if you look deeply, right, what we talked about, like, for example, there's a Patrick David just released a book. It's called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. And he has a story right there in the beginning of the book, that what was the thing like that he wasn't doing well in life. He was 50 grand in debt. He wasn't really doing anything out of himself. And then something that his dad's friends said to his dad, triggered him. And because they were like making fun of his dad. It's like, oh, you used to be a chemist. Now you give out bags at the dollar store, right? And it pissed him off so much that he was like, people remember our name, right? And why do I say that? I say that because it's like, that was, that's the chip on your shoulder, right? That's the choosing your enemies wisely, let it fuel you. And I think I think it's not a great strategy for it to fuel your life 24/7 for the rest of your life. Because I've had that problem too and learned it the hard way. But I do feel like it can be very valuable fuel, right? How you take things like anger and jealousy and resentment, like you can turn it into moving forward, or you can let it, burn you to the ground. And so starting there, right, we both kind of talked, hey, chip on the shoulder. When you said the amount of people that told me I could never make it in basketball, that list is forever long. I mean, like we're talking, every phase of my career, it's like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that fueled me, right? So there's that thing, like what's your jet fuel, right? And then part two is attaching things to your anchor. So for example, for me training, once I realized like, damn, like when I lift weights, when I do these plyometric exercises, like I bump, like nobody can guard me now because like I'm stronger than them. So I got this advantage. I can bump you. I can post up. Like other guys are just trying to shoot. Also, like, hey, I'm not slower. I'm actually getting stronger. I'm actually faster. I'm jumping higher. So that to me was like performance training, better basketball, right? So you connect those two dots, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm buying in. I'm committed. And then I started going down a rabbit hole. Because one thing I didn't mention, I mean, because again, that could be a really long story. At 16, my basketball coach knew this guy. His name was Srđan Đorđević. Hard name to say, but he was literally one of the top. I mean, he trained Marilyn Adi, Brigitte Bukovic were like Olympians, right? Olympic medalists, gold. Brigitte was silver in the Barcelona Olympics in '92. I was like nuts, right? Like I was this obsessive kid, and I go to Boris and I'm like, hey, can you introduce me to him and stuff? So he does. He goes to him. He's like, I got this crazy kid. He'll do anything. Can he come train with you guys, right? And he was like, sure. Have him show up at 6:15 in the morning before school, thinking like there's no way I'm going to show up. I'm showing up all the time, but like at 16, 17, I'm training with Olympians. Brigitte Bukovic is showing me foot fire drills and 10% of your weight to do sled sprints for acceleration. And he's doing EKG stuff on me. He was one of the first people in the world doing that stuff, right? So I'm learning. And at the first, he was actually annoyed that I kept showing up. And after a while, he was just like, dude, this kid's nuts. Like he's dedicated. Because I wanted to just, at that point in time, it was like, how can I dunk it, right? Because the first time I dunked it was like when I was 17. I was probably like 5'10", probably a good 5'10". But that was the same thing. I was being driven. And I think about like, how many things I learned from him in that time. Holy shit. Like never thinking, oh, later on, I'm going to be in a world of fitness and sports performance, and this will benefit me. But this was all, again, going back to Cal Newport's book. He calls it career capital, right? Deliberate practice. So, as I was working hard to become a basketball player, I was really having, thousands, tens of thousands of hours of deliberate practice in training and fitness and nutrition and speed and like all from some of the best in the world. And again, when you can attach something, you've heard this in when people want to make a body transformation, whatever it is, right? What's your anchor, right? If you're like, oh man, I just want to lose some weight, why is that important to you? The 5, 6, and 7 whys. Like let's get deeper to this, right? And I do this at the gym where you peel the onions and it's like, hey, you know what? Like, man, I just got divorced. I feel horrible. I have no confidence. I feel like I'm not a leader for my kids. I can't even go play pickup with them because I get exhausted, right? Like, and it's like, man, that's deep, man. That's painful. That's an anchor, right? So if you start attaching, I would say the things that you do, the improving your nutrition, to go into the gym, to that anchor, when times get hard, you're still going to be able to like make it through. You might not be perfect. You might fall off a little bit, but you'll get back on track because you got a strong North Star, right? But if you're just like, well, I just want to look a little better. It's when challenging times come, it's going to be much more difficult to stay on track, right? So I'm a big believer in finding that anchor. And sometimes the anchor is like revenge body. I'm cool with that. Like we all move from, if you've heard from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation, right? Me and you today, like if you didn't get all these, like if you didn't look great because of training, I'd still train because of how I feel because of training. Right?
100%.
That's intrinsic motivation. Like, dude, I just want to go get a workout and it's great for my mental health. I feel awesome. Right. But at the beginning, I have I think it's fine. Like I've been that person where it's like, I'm going to do this so I can prove them wrong. I want to look great when I go on a beach in the summer. Right. And because if you start with extrinsic motivation, I got my 20-year reunion coming up. I want to make sure I look great. But that leads you over time to intrinsic. That's how it works. It's perfectly fine. But you do have to have an anchor. You do have to have something to attach to. And I know that's a little bit of a longer answer, but it's like I still coach hundreds of people every week. And it's like it ends up being, I see who overcomes the challenges is the person that, finds their anchor. And it's a lot easier to go like, hey, remember why you're doing this, right? Oh, man, okay, yeah, right. I'm always bringing them back to that thing that's really important to them. That's going to be like, okay, I'm going to take this pain of, the training session or getting up earlier or, preparing my meals over the pain that I wanted to get away from when I came here. I reached out to you because of this. And that's for all of us at all periods of time, right? Like the things that are driving me now, there's an anchor that makes me go do the things that I do. I'm sure for you, it's the same thing. And I think it's a disservice to not help people find that, because all the X's and O's and all the shit that we know about, training and nutrition, it's like they're not going to be as effective if there's not a buy-in. So we have to help that buy-in first.
Exactly. I think that's a huge issue in the industry now, where I think a lot of people want to be right before they connect with somebody. And nobody really cares how much you know as a coach, X's and O's, whatever it is, until they know that you can meet them on the level that they are at. And that's where really good conscious communication comes in when it comes to being able to create a transformational experience, right? Like, listen, our name of our podcast, name of our program, Look Great Naked Protocol. That's something a lot of people come in because that's an immediate visceral thing. But, once you start to see progress, you start to go deeper down the rabbit hole of all these different things. And you start to realize how improving your body improves all these different areas of your life that might be that anchor that could be a lot deeper. It could be that you're an executive and you're like, wow, my mental clarity is so much higher now and I have better focus and better sleep and I can make a bigger impact with my business. Or it could be the example that you said before. Now I have the energy to run around my kids. I can, go play a pickup game of ball and I'm not out of breath, right? It's like all these little things where it's like, as a coach, we got to be able to meet people directly where they're at first and foremost and kind of find what's that immediate external kind of goal that they have. And then just start to build the habits and build the knowledge and build the enjoyment in the process itself. And then you find that anchor that becomes so much deeper to create that long-term transformational experience. Something that you had mentioned before, was there was a downside towards using anger and trying to, I'll show you like that perspective. Personally, like that's something for me, I've really only become aware of. I'm 34 now, probably really since like my late 20s, because there was a lot of time early on in my career. And I got started in the fitness industry really young. Whereas like, I'll show you, I'll do better in all these components. And then pretty soon you're like, that's not serving me anymore. It's like there's a glass ceiling in terms of who I am as a person when I'm kind of running on this idea of not necessarily anger, but like wanting to prove people wrong. And it sounds like you probably had a little bit of that directly with your experience in basketball. Is that something that
Well,
you
I mean,
experienced?
I've had a lot of that in my life. That was the problem, is that I'm really good in being in a scarcity mindset where I'm like, it's me against everybody. And but again, that's unhealthy, and I'll explain, why. And actually, let me give you a story about, like, I joined a program a long time ago when I went through my divorce, and was doing dumb stuff in my life, and got therapy and went to Wake Up Warrior. And by the way, like, I like to say this because this used to be so hard for me to say. It's really difficult for men to admit that they have a problem. It's really difficult for men to ask for help. That was like the most challenging. I've been through a lot of stuff in my life, like a lot. And that was probably the most challenging time in my life because of the guilt and shame of things that I've did. But it was that plus then going like, I admit it, I need help, right? And it was a massive breakthrough for me. But I say this to say I went to this program, and one of the things that Garrett, back then was my mentor, brought up, said, hey, most people operate like this. There's scarcity and abundance, right? So in scarcity, they do well because it's like, all right, got nothing to lose. Let's go back up against the wall. Let's fight, right? And from there, you push, you get to abundance. Now you get to abundance, and it's like, okay, cool. And then after a while, but there might not be any spark. There might not be anybody against you. You've built some success. So subconsciously, people will burn it to the ground and then repeat the cycle. What he taught me is like, hey, look, there's another place. It's called legacy, right? So as scarcity, there's abundance and there's legacy. So if you from abundance go like, oh, hold on. There's this thing pulling me, not pushing, but pulling me, right? And that can be, look, when you have kids, for sure, it's kind of like one of those, hey, who do I want my kids to be? I have to be a lighthouse and representation of that. In the industry, for me, it's, now I'm in this phase of, hey, how can I, like, I'm building courses. I got a book coming out next year, and another one, hopefully, a year and a half, two after that, certification, doing tons of speaking, tons of seminars, mentoring people, because I'm like, here's the thing, regardless if it matters 1,000 years from now or not, believing that leaving a legacy for your family, for your community, for the industry, see, that's a positive fuel. Okay. Whereas that, like, chip on the shoulder, it's like, it can be useful, but man, it'll also burn you out. It's a different type of fuel. I'm always like learning how to, and by the way, you learn this through experience, and hopefully you learn it through insights and mentoring from people, that if you keep going back to that negative fuel, that like chip on the shoulder, that, negative energy that like it does take a toll out of you. Right. And I feel like once you start realizing is like, there's something better, there's a legacy to leave. And that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It's a different drive. I learned that the hard way because I did it quite a, I would say up until age 30, there was parts of my life where I would always like build it up, burn something to the ground, redo it again. And I was kind of stuck in that
Yeah.
cycle. And, I had to have that aha moment because there's this saying, right? Awareness precedes change, right? And awareness, sometimes you get awareness through, pain. Sometimes it's through assessment. You hire a coach, and the coach sees something you don't. Like I always say, you can't read the label from inside the bottle, right? And that goes
It's
for
a great
business
quote.
or your life, right? And it's like somebody would go like, hey, here's what somebody you respect, somebody you aspire to be like, and they, hey man, like, here's what I'm noticing, right? And you respect them enough to now this assessment became an awareness, like, oh shit, I do that, right? I'm interrupting people all the time. I always want to have my way. I don't listen enough. Those were hard realizations, and thankfully, I've been good about asking for help for the last, 10 plus years of my life, whether it's coaching in business, coaching personally, I've been for 15 years, I've been in masterminds and mentorships. And I think that's kind of like a cheat code for sure. Again, when environments trigger behaviors, environments change you, and you pick your environment. So when it comes to whether it's business, fitness, whatever it may be, right? Like, imagine if you just surround yourself with people that are all committed to this thing that you aspire to be like: healthy body, working on your mindset, being fit, healthy, looking good. Like, that's going to become your norm. That's going to become the tribal standard. And so you're going to adhere to this tribal standard. That's how we are as human beings. So picking your environment, can be such a powerful thing to do. And I know I always try to, if I'm going all over the place, is always to bring it back to, what we're talking about. But that's true, right? I mean, you are molded by the people and the environments that you're around, and you might not be able to choose all of them, but you can choose quite a lot of them. And so picking those can really, really help you move into the direction that you want to move into.
Yeah, that's been such a profound thing, really, really for me too. This was back, I guess, probably 8 years ago. I had just left, working in a high-end performance area. I had some incredible mentors and coaches who worked with Denver Nuggets, Denver Broncos, worked in their private facilities, and NFL combine training. All this stuff was absolutely great. This is what I thought my dream was when I first got in the industry, until I started really building my online brand and all these components. And a couple weeks after I had left this job and kind of bet everything on myself, on Bach Performance, the brand, and just kind of saying, whatever, I'm going to make it work. I was training a client and I refused to answer my phone. I'm in a session. Like, I don't care like how many times, but my phone was going off for like 10 minutes straight. And I picked up the phone and it's my accountant's assistant. I'm like, what's going on here? This isn't great. And like, long story short, my accountant that I had hired, because I didn't know what to do with my books at that age. I'm just like trying not to do anything illegal. And my accountant had stole over $100,000 from my business. And like my nest egg.
That's so crazy.
Right. And like, so like what this did for me, like on one hand, it was like, awesome, game on, my back's against the wall. I remember reading The Power of Broke by Damon John. I'm like, fuck it, we're just going to go. Like, we're going to make it work because that's what we do. But coming on the back side of it, like, I also realized like in some ways it was a really good thing because it made me think outside the box and test myself and push myself. But it also created almost like just a drive based on cortisol, just based on stress. And so like you talk about kind of getting these cycles. Yeah, like you start to ramp up stress internally, putting more demands on yourself and just being go, go, go. And then without taking the time to step back and really reflect, like, what's the biological cost of this?
Yes.
It's like trying to just, the gym equation would be like, I'm just going to train more and more and more without considering the biological cost on your joints and everything else that's going on. Or like what we call now in our coaching is our synergy system. You need to have the balance between your ability to recover, your training, nutrition, and these things have to be in balance versus just like, I want to do this diet and this nutrition thing because they sound cool. Like if they're not physiologically aligned, like you're going to spin your wheels.
That's exactly it. I mean, you stress, right? Is it good stress or is it bad stress? And look, stress is good. I mean, look, we want to adapt to it, but just like anything else, and I mean, this comes to training, right? It's like, are you doing too much? I mean, I love, and again, I want to geek, like we could geek out about training as much as possible here, but most of the people that either start training, and I promise I'll connect these two dots that we're talking about, right? We get a lot of folks that they work, they have families, and either they are really truly beginners or they haven't done anything for a long time. High school, college, sport, maybe even pro sport, life happens and they're back at it, right? Now, even for them, they're like, well, I want to get back into it. When I have a conversation like, hey, how many times have you started and stopped type of thing, right? Oh, the last time you started, what happened? Training 6 days a week, went on this diet, right? I prefer to start like, hey, let's do 2 strength sessions a week, 2 cardio. And for some, it might be like, that's it. But man, first of all, they don't need that much to get a quality adaptation, right? And we have a lot of room and a lot of leeway. And plus, it's also like, this is stress that you haven't had and you're going to adapt to it. And then we can build some more stress and some more stress and some more stress. But you know what's not going to be great? If we just atomic bomb you with stress, right? Like you're telling me you work 12 hours a day, you got 3 kids, you had this thing happen to you. Yeah, great. Let's do 4 really hardcore strength sessions, 2 high intensity conditioning sessions. Like you can't recover from that, and you might have a, quick burst of results and then you're going to hit a wall, inflammation, injury, all of a sudden you're going to have cravings, you're eating too low on a calorie side, right? Like it's the same thing. It's like if somebody has a massive amount of stress in their personal life, unfortunately, this is what people do. Like they have training that deals with their stress. So they go train hardcore.
Yep.
And of course, stress is stress. And it's like the bathtub analogy. I always like the bathtub analogy. Every faucet in the bathtub is something: relationship stress, work stress, family stress, training stress, for instance, nutrition stress, good or bad. Well, if the bathtub fills up and it overflows, that's where you hit the wall, or you get overtraining, or just like depression, all these different things. You're going to get an injury because the tissues can't handle that much. So it's like, okay, I always talk to clients like, maybe there's a faucet that we just can't turn off. Like it's not in your control. But what are some faucets that we can tune down and we can manage this stress so that you get the adaptations that you want, right? And that might mean they go, hey, you were training 5 days a week, let's go down to 3, right? And they'll get better results. And it's like the amount of people that I get that are A-type, executive types that come to me and they're like, I'm training like a madman. My results have stopped. I'm having issues. And then I have to spend about a month, sometimes 2, easing them back because they're like, how are we going to do less? And then also tricking them into like, we're going to do aerobic capacity work instead of this like crazy hardcore conditioning that you did.
Yeah.
So you're still training 5-6 days a week, but we've just tuned down the intensity on a whole bunch of training. And then 3 months later, they're PRing and everything. They feel better. They put on muscle. Their strength levels have gone up. And it's like, hey, man, you're getting more, but you're doing less. And again, this is that whole like turning the dials of life. And that's why, like earlier when you were, I forgot what you said, but I was like, oh man, like the conversation about, the coaching is an art and a science, because you can know all the X's and O's, but like getting people communicating things clearly, getting buy-in and helping them buy in into, what you're trying to get them to do. And also turning things down, turning things up. And remember, like I kind of categorize it in 4 things because it's simple for people to understand. There's training, there's nutrition, there's recovery, there's mindset, right? And we work with those buckets. And sometimes it's like we turn some down and we turn some up. And those 4, help people sustainably achieve something like the result that they want that they can keep. That's kind of like the idea of that.
Yeah. And I think one of the hardest things that people really have, especially you mentioned like the type A exec, they have this expectation of being able to go back to training they were maybe when they were at their physical peak without thinking about the stressors in all these different areas. And, you mentioned stress is stress. Yeah, our body can't differentiate between, getting cut off in traffic from spending way too much time watching the news, whatever it is. It's like creating more stress directly in your life. And if we just crank that dial all the way, you're going to get sick, you're going to get beat up, all these different things. And so it's like, how can you maximize with the minimum effective dose and then gradually build on that so your body becomes more resilient to what it is? Especially again, with like executives and former athletes, one thing that I find is many people get so used to maybe having like the workouts designed for them from their staff and being able to push and having the teamwork and the camaraderie that when they stop playing sports, like they've known how to push themselves, but they don't know how to actually internally get that drive going without that same external support system. Mm-hmm. And it's like, this is why you see so many athletes say they get done playing college ball or something like that. They'll be good to like 25, then they start piling on the weight. All of a sudden they're 40 and they have this expectation for themselves where they should look, feel, and perform a certain way because of how they were previously, without being able to, I guess, realign what's actually practical, sustainable with where they are now, given all these other dials filling up the bathtub have been overflowing for years. And that's a huge like mental thing to navigate, and understanding that like we can lean in to the experiences, to the physicality of these things that you know about yourself, but we might have to go about it a little bit of a different way. And I think that's one of the big things, especially when you have somebody who wants to become an athlete and have that athletic capability again. So speaking directly on the training side, you mentioned you might start with somebody going like 2 days a week in a strength session, 2 days a week for like a cardiovascular session. Like, what does a typical strength session look like? Are you doing like any types of jumps, like any big mistakes that you see a lot of people make before they might come to work with you?
Hell yeah. All right. Let's dive in. I mean, so the thing is, it's really going to be dependent on the person, right? So I can give a couple of different scenarios, but I really like, a long time ago from my friend Mike Robertson, I learned the R7 system, right? Which is basically, there's 7, like what should every training session consist of? And it's these 7 R's. R1 is release. That's all your soft tissue work. And you can put anything in that bucket: foam rolling, lacrosse balls, tempering, you name it, right? And people will argue now, like, what does that stuff do? And here's the thing. We still don't fully know. But what I do know is if I give somebody a lacrosse ball and have them like tune down their lat and work on the back of their shoulder and their hips, they feel better. So, we teach people to come in. We usually teach them this stuff. So they do that themselves once they've been taught that before we actually train with them. Then R2 is a reset. And reset is 2 different things. It's the nervous system. So for example, a lot of folks come in and train after work in traffic for 45 minutes, pissed off, boss pissed them off, kids, this, that, the other. Their sympathetic nervous system is off the rockers. They're coming in tone tense, right? And so a reset on one side is like imagine like this scale, right? They're super sympathetic. We just want to balance them out. It's not, we're not trying to calm them down and like put them, make them, I would say, meditate with the Shia monks for 2 hours. It's, we're going to do box breathing drills or positional breathing, which I like to do, right? Like you're in a couch stretch position and then you're going to do four exhale, 4 hold, 4 inhale, 4 hold. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, by the way, right? So that's one of the things it does. It's a autonomic nervous system kind of reset, right? Second is getting your joints into better positions. Now, there's tons of modalities to do this, right? Like you got PRI, you got FRC and kin stretches and stuff like that. So there's different things that you'll do, but we only do like 1 to 2 drills, by the way. This doesn't take a long time. This is like, hey, 3-4 minutes maybe, right?
Yeah.
R3 is readiness. Readiness is pretty much a dynamic warm-up, right? Super simple, meaning dynamic warm-up. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to get the joints prepped. We're going to get the core temperature up. And we're going to like probably get some movements involved that are going to be like the training session. So if we're squatting, we're going to do Spider-Man lunge with rotation. We're going to do a squat to stand. We might do some tie sits. We might do some, I would say 3-way glute activation drills. And then we're going to ramp it up. I always like to ramp stuff up at the end of warm up and do athletic drills, high knees, skips, pogo jumps, side to side. By the way, we'll do this even if it's like a 50, 60-year-old client. It's just going to look different. High knees are going to be very low to the ground. Their speed's not going to be as high, right? We're going to give them regressions. But that is my philosophy. And I think this is where a lot of people kind of mess up is that, it's like, oh, well, Susie Sue, she's fragile. And it's like, no, you just gotta find a thing that's going to be pretty fast for her and her tissues can tolerate. And I think I think that's a big part of the art. Then we go to R4 is reactive. So every person is going to do something explosive, plyometric, power-based. If I look at the continuum of people and I go like, hey, here's a former athlete that I have. Yeah, man, that might be for them a box jump. It might be a rotational med ball throw. It might be, squat jumps, or we might get, really plyometric and do low hurdle hops and twitchy lateral jumps, skater jumps. Like there's tons of stuff we can fit in there. For an older person, it might be a, wall throw with a med ball. It might be a slam. It might be, again, foot fire, very, very safe. It might be a sled push, right? We just want them to get some of those fast twitch, I would say, motor units firing that they're not used to. And with time, we'll be able to progress this and make them do more complex stuff. But again, there's going to be something reactive in every training session. And by the way, lower body, upper body, there's tons of, we could go into the different movement patterns and everything else. Then we get to R5. R4 was reactive. R5 is resistance. So that's our strength training. To me, I'm always like, I look at like strength training has like actual strength training and resistance training. To me, those are a little bit different. Strength training is like, we're going to get stronger. Resistance training is like, oh, we're going to, build muscle, build our tissues up. R5 is usually probably most of the time the biggest piece of the pie of a training session. But like, for example, if somebody is very deconditioned, we might spend 20 minutes plus of that training session doing dynamic warm-ups because that's going to be hard for them, right?
That's conditioning at the same time,
Absolutely. 100%, right? Like it's like they get done and their heart rate's at 155, 160. So I explain this as a piece of the pie analogy. When you look at the R7, it's like, how many pieces of the pie am I allocating to this? And I'll give you like, again, 2 very different examples. NFL guy that already just hit me up. Like I train quite a few NFL guys in off season, also in season. They'll come to me about once a week. But I want hit me and said, hey, listen, I really like next off season, I really want to work on my first step explosiveness, right? This is like literally he says, this is my priority. Okay. So I'm going to do an assessment of everything end of season once you get some rest. And then we're going to look at like, okay, how much are we going to allocate of that pie? Because he's a very strong dude, by the way, very strong dude. We don't need a lot of piece of that pie to maintain that strength. But we're going to need to put quite a more time in on mobility. I already know, getting more explosive, right? Having more elasticity. Boom. Okay, now we got a brand new person that can't really even move well. They have very little experience with strength training. So I'm going to have a big chunk of that pie be readiness. And at the beginning, maybe I have one drill for them that's reactive and it's like a med ball throw. It's super safe. And then we got a little bit of resistance training. Maybe we have like two different exercises in 2 supersets for 2 sets. That's it. So we're talking about literally like 8 sets in a whole workout. By the way, this might be very hard for them. Then we go to R6, which is resilience. That's conditioning. That's our cardio. Again, well, we can kind of go back to this. Cardio, I think, is a very, 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 very misunderstood thing. I've been very fortunate that my neighbor, one of my best friends in the world, Joel Jameson, lives here. I've known him for 14 years now. I can pretty much teach his certifications. The number one guy in the world for conditioning, best cert in the world for conditioning. And so very misunderstood. Cardio is extremely misunderstood. And so that's going to be R6 and R7's recovery, right? And recovery is like, we're going to start a cool down. And there's actually a cool down protocol that I like to have with people. So instead of, because if you think about training is stressful. It's sympathetic, right? It's fight or flight.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks, like if you go into a regular gym, go and sit there and just watch what happens. Somebody gets done with their last set and just fucking walks out, right? High strung, into the car, probably still drinking an energy drink, so their recovery is not starting for a while. So we teach people, even if like they go and take a 3-minute walk around the block, but usually I'm like, get on the bike, 3 minutes, 100 beats per minute or less. Part 2, box breathing. Part 3, stretch or foam roll, but not hard, like relaxing, soothing. All right, that's going to take you about 6 minutes, right? But now you've put your body back into a parasympathetic state, rest and digest. Your body's now starting to recover and adapt to the training session. That's kind of like I look at every training session through that R7 lens, but it's going to look very different depending on who it is, what they want to achieve. And again, that piece of the pie might get allocated differently. Also, like I train pro sports teams and high school teams. We just, with the basketball high school team, we just went from off season to in season. That R7 looks different now, because now it's like stimulate, don't annihilate, right? Okay, these kids aren't playing a lot. You're going to push a little bit harder here. You guys are playing more. Here's what we're going to work on. So again, but it does give you a template and a lens to look through and go, hey, I want to have all of this in my recipe for people to have a great training session and also to build the athleticism. Because I'm like, that idea of like athlete for life, I believe in it so wholeheartedly, and I can give you all the science behind it. But like in general, like there's no person, by the way, and Eric, you let me know, if this resonates with you, right? Dude, I want to look like that guy on the cover. Okay, cool. You can get that. Your hips are going to hurt. If you sprint, you're going to pull a hammy. You can't really, you can't go for a hike, for 8-mile hike whenever you want, because you just don't have that ability. You'd be like, I don't know. Fuck, that sounds kind of shit. Of course, you want the show and the go. Like you want to be able to do stuff. I don't know what you want to do, but I know you want to be able to do stuff. You don't want to just look great, but feel like shit. Your health is down. You walk around. You can't barely move. If you do something really explosive and strenuous, like, man, something's going to explode. Nobody wants that. People want to be able, and it might be like, I want to just pick up my grandkid real quick and lift him up above the head. Okay, well, that's an athletic movement. So you want to be able to look good, feel good, the health, like I would say what's under the hood, and you want to be able to perform. Like everybody wants that.
Yeah, that's such a huge piece, right? It's like, again, sure, look great naked, like it might be the thing that gets people in, right? But what does that give you? Because is it to be able to play a game? Is it to be able to go on a hike and do these things? That's where understanding, I like your analogy. I was actually drawing a pie on my notebook over here as you said that. And I was kind of thinking, even like making a player like Madden or something like that, you got all these attributes you can give in any different area. And it changes as you go through that journey, right? As you mature, as you go through different stressors in your life. And like, you have to be able to decide, what point do I need to put more emphasis on the conditioning? Or the example of the NFL athlete, hey, when do we need to maybe focus a little bit more on the elasticity versus the pure baseline foundation of strength, which might have been the best thing for him when he was in high school. Like, a lot of people get stuck in trying to do the same thing that they did previously, thinking that's going to get to the new level, without understanding how to make these finer tweaks across the board, which really bring in that ultimate human potential of becoming that lifelong athlete. One thing that you hit on specifically was, kind of always trying to focus on something that's going to train high threshold motor units, those fast twitch muscle fibers, something like that. What is the importance for that for longevity? For somebody who's maybe not necessarily playing a sport, but say they're 30, they're 40, they're 50, 60, 70, like why is that important?
Well, let's look at, this statistic. I'll give a couple, right? The first thing that we lose with aging is not strength. It's not muscle mass. It's power, right? It's being able to turn on. It's the whole, like, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And so, but now look at, the stat that if you're over 55 years old, 1 out of 3 people that fall break their hip, which is, that's insane. Right. And by the way, breaking your hip, the recovery is ridiculous. It takes about a year. It's 9 to 12 months, I think. And the average person puts on a lot of weight because you're so immobile, right? You can't really do much. And if I would have to look back into the stats, but the stats of like the mortality after you break your hip goes up significantly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it would actually blow your mind. You'd think I was lying. I can't pull it off the top of my head, but it's nuts. And so it greatly reduces the quality of life. Mortality goes up. But what is falling? When you fall, it is your agility, your response time, is the quickness of when you can catch yourself. And like my mom like has both my mom and my dad, but my mom has Parkinson's, and like in the last 2 years, she takes certain meds and stuff like that that lower her blood pressure. And also, she hasn't done them. We now have a physical therapist that comes to the house to start doing drills and strength training for the last year, because she would basically, get a little lightheaded and then she would fall and she wouldn't have the reflexes to catch herself. And she would always break a bone, right? Break the femur, break the hand, which again, it's like really when you look at power training, I mean, the quality of your life. And so if you're thinking like, well, listen, I don't go out and play flag football. No, it's not that. The amount of things that happen in your life that are like you trip and you have to quickly refoot yourself. Or imagine like your kid is falling. Oh shit, right?
Yeah.
Your reaction and reflex, whether you have it, when or a kid. I've seen this by the way. I've had 15 years ago, I had a really bad back injury, and I've seen in real life a child jump on a parent unexpectedly. The parent catches them and blows their back out. Okay, I've seen this happen in live multiple times, right? Because the slow reflexes, they get caught in a bad position, and we could go down the list. I mean, a forever long list of why you would need that. Which also, by the way, being able to turn on high threshold motor units is related well to also strength, right? So, by the way, force is mass times acceleration. So in the fitness industry, you get, I mean, thankfully there's more and more people talking about this, but people only focus on the mass part. I lifted heavier. I'm a big fan of VBT monitors, right? Velocity-based training.
Yeah.
Because they give me, and we use it with athletes, but I use it myself because now, and if you've ever done, a trap bar deadlift, and let's say I can deadlift, in a low 500s right now, and I would look at my actual power output. Then I'd put on 405 and lift it as fast as I possibly can. My power would be higher than it is with, like, for instance, 515. What's going on here now, right? I'm actually, I was saying, engaging more high threshold motor units than I did with a really heavy lift. And so there's again, like I do a lot of this even with general population where we will, throw lighter stuff. That would be that 10 to 30%, and then go into that power. And then we do strength speed where we're using 50 to 75% of loads and moving it fast. And here's what's cool about it, right? A client might be coming in and going like, man, I'm toasted. If I told them like, hey, we're going to lift really heavy today, mentally, they're like,
Yeah.
can't do that. But then like, you know what? Don't worry, we're going to use 50% of load. And I show them a VBT monitor and show them how fast they're lifting. So they have a feedback. And we can go like, hey, listen, 2 weeks ago, you were lifting at this speed. You're actually lifting faster, producing more force. So it has so many different, I would say, positives, right? That's like that transfer over to life, but also that can make lifting more fun, more competitive, right? Because it's like you can lift lighter weights and get after it. And we've had, crews in semi-private where they're like, oh man, 1.2 meters per second. Let's go, and now they're like, bracing, ripping, and getting the most force production that they've ever gotten. That also because remember, there's a kind of speed velocity curve. The velocity curve from strength to speed, and most people just like lift heavy, right? And in those kind of slower,
Neglect everything else.
But we need those things. We need those whether you want to be an athlete for life and play basketball with your kids or football or this, that, go play pickup games. But it's just, there's so many things that happen in a day that, like I had to go up on a roof of the building that I own, and I have to like glue stuff and shovel like 50 pounds of leaves in one shovel stroke off. And people are doing stuff like this every day. These are all athletic movements. When I'm shoveling, I have to lunge, I have to lift and rotate, have rotary power. Like I don't give a shit. Like you could film a human being that says, I don't give a shit about sport, and film them throughout the day. And you're going to see, 50 instances of where they have to be athletic. And if they're not, it's going to beat up their joints. The risk of injury goes up, nagging, aching joints. So it's like, it just transfers to so many different things. And what I think about is like, many times I'm going to hide the medicine inside of the dessert. It's like I have to do it for my dog. Lucy doesn't want to, she's like, I know what that shit is. I'm not eating it. Boom, I put that little thing in peanut butter. Man, she crushes it. And so
Game over.
So it's like your podcast, like, is look great naked, right? Absolutely. And at the beginning, extrinsic motivation. But here's the thing. I'm going to be like, hey, listen, when we can activate high threshold motor units, this is going to really help you with building lean muscle, right? And hey, the more lean muscle that we have, it's going to burn more calories 24/7. I'm going to attach the thing to what they want. And they're like, oh, cool, awesome. Right. But now I got them doing my athletic things. And what's going to happen is after a while, they go like, man, I like doing this athletic shit. I
It's
did,
fun.
I had a guy that came in, is in my small group, and he's like, yo, I played ball yesterday. This is crazy. Like I move better. My step back, I get an extra foot on my step back, dude. That's nuts. But again, came in for one reason. Now he's going to hoop, and he's like, this is transferring so well. Holy shit. Even more bought in, right? That's essentially what we end up doing, right? I'm looking at it and going, I'm going to give you what you want, but man, I know you need these things. And so I'm going to sneak them in, but eventually I'm going to connect those two stories, and you're going to start loving the things that we're doing and understanding how important it is for your life. And then you're going to be like, nope, I got to do athletic stuff. Got to do athletic stuff. Right. And that's the mindset behind Athlete for Life. Because a lot of people, when I talk to them, it's like, well, Luka, like, yeah, you still go hoop and you box and you do all these things. And like, I don't really care about that. You have to like really, then I'll ask them questions. Hey, what do you do about, like, what do you do? Well, I go to this, I go to this, I go to this. And you start realizing that they're actually doing a lot of athletic stuff. And they're like, yeah, my back does kind of hurt and my hips and this and right. And you're like, man, you can, you don't have to have that, because this belief that this is just how it is. We just age, and we get slower and we get weaker, and that's not true. That's just not true. And that belief system is a lot of times driving you to not exercise in a certain way. Now, yes, we have to be smart. Like I have a little bit of this is a little bit generic, but a rule for most 40 to 50, jumps/contacts per week when people start off with. Instead of doing plyometrics, we're going to do jump training. We're going to land on a box, right? We're going to do throws. We might do a sled or prowler. We're going to get their tissues to adapt to this and not go gung-ho, and then build it back up. I think that's the other mistake, right? That's like you read a magazine and it's like, Adrian Peterson's workout, DK Metcalf's training session. And it's like, yeah, man, I read that in a magazine, so I went and did it. And I pulled something. I'm like, of course you did, right? I mean, you can't just emulate people. You have to have a program that's made for you for where you are. And, I just look at the GPS. You are here on a GPS. You want to go here. Cool. Let's build a path, right? But it's going to be unique to you and based on your training history, your injury history, your preferences, lifestyle, a lot of these different things. But, but to say, I don't need that is nuts. Now, look, if you're a bodybuilder and that's your competition and you're like, all I give a shit about is like being on stage winning the bodybuilding competition, what I'm saying might not be for you, even though what I'm saying is still relevant. Majority of the people that, I coach, that I talk to, and now there's a lot of people, no one doesn't want the go. No one doesn't want the performance. No one.
Yeah, and I think that's such a big component. I think a lot of people as well in the fitness industry, they get disenchanted with like some of the body composition stuff as well, because they've tried it. They've tried the ultra strict meal plans, these different diet protocols, all these things that don't have any sustainability or practicality with where they are. And they think that it's my way or the highway. One thing that I've realized when it comes to incorporating these athletic based principles, whether we're talking about jumps, doing things that are more on the speed strength realm, whatever it is, it's fun. They enjoy it and they start to see that carryover. It's like, this is a different way to train than I have before. I'm really getting enjoyment out of it. And then again, depending on what level they are, they're still seeing many of those body composition changes, because it could be anything from activating high threshold muscle or motor units, which can also obviously help provide that baseline of strength, which by extension can allow you to do more overall volume and load. It's like they're all connected. It just comes down to understanding what piece of the pie you delegate in what area, and then keeping it true and congruent with where you are on the GPS and applying it directly to your life. Luka, man,
and if I can share one story and one rant, right?
Yeah.
The story is this. Have you ever, we do a lot of, we do semi-private training, athlete groups, we do groups, small group personal training. Take a group of people. I don't give a shit who they are. 57-year-old lady, 22-year-old guy, 41-year-old guy with hip replacement, and make them do a competitive drill. Knee tap, shoulder tap drill. We do these for warm-ups sometimes. Or in a crawl position, tap the shoulder, right? They're moving around. And then watch their face. Everybody starts smiling. Everybody starts competing. Yeah. It's taking them back to when you were a child and you're playing games and you're free and fun. And it's but they're doing that while they're getting more athletic. We'll do prowler races, right? We'll do so many different, and it's people just, it's something happens, right? Even the person that's I just want to get healthier and lose weight. Boom, all of a sudden they're you see their face and they're smiling, right? So I guarantee you'll see that everywhere. Now, of course, adapt the drill to the audience. So that's one thing that I'm when you bring it up and you say it's fun, absolutely, it's cool. Older person, I'm hey, listen, you had a rough week. Yeah, man. Okay, if you break this dynamo, I will give you $50. You don't have to pay me. I'll give you $50. Sometimes, I had cutouts, put my face on the ground and be like, I know you don't like me right now. And they're throwing it at my face, and right. It's
That's funny.
fun. It's fun. But so that's my first point, is like creating like people do have inside of them something that makes them want to compete. Right. And we just have to bring them back out and keep it safe. Number two is that, like, the fitness industry, by the way, I love the fitness industry the most on the planet. That's why I've dedicated my life to this. Right. But there are, it is many a times too segmented. And it's like, ooh, I'm going to pitch hypertrophy. And so everybody will do hypertrophy. And I'm going to talk shit to anybody that doesn't. Hey, that exercise that I saw, it's, you could do it better for building muscle. It's like, but, Ben Bruno was talking about this on Joe D's podcast. But what if they don't want to build muscle? What if they want to be more athletic? What if they want to move faster? What if they want a better stability? But it's like, oh, but I have to die by my sword and my ideology because that's better for getting followers on Instagram, right? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm the mobility guy, so everything is this, everything is that. And it's like, we know, like, there's no such thing as like one thing, right? I mean, the whole premise of R7 is like, or look at athletics, or look at the human being. If you're strong, but your cardio is like horrible and it sucks, that's going to be a problem, right? And like that's why, like, cardio is this thing that mitochondria is the engine of life. For you and me to speak right now and talk, we need cardio. We need aerobic capacity, right? For us to recover faster, for us to be able to do a lot of different things, we have to build our aerobic engine. Most programs don't have that included because it's like, cardio is a side dish. You do it for fat loss, or, now thankfully there's more and more of it coming out where it's like, hey, cardio is for health. And it's really important, right? That one of the markers of high mortality is VO2 max. Again, like, you can't just go, there's this one thing, like get strong or get fast or no, for most people on this planet, it's a combination of them. And the magic is in piecing it together in that pie, having people continue to come back. This is my other thing. By the way, I was this shithead 15 years ago in the industry, right? No, this is the best thing for you, and it's like, if the person gets off the couch and starts doing Zumba, I'm clapping, bro. I'm like, this is great. This is phenomenal. If they go and do this other thing and it gets them doing something, hell yes. It's getting them into the world and getting them doing something for themselves. And today it's like, there's so many arguments. Now, look, I'm absolutely against people that spew unethical shit. 100%, shut that shit down. When we go like, oh, you're doing that, there's something better than that. You completely demoralize like the fact that it was maybe really difficult for this person to make a first step and make a first move. And we're like, oh, I'm so smart. Like, did you know that blah, 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 blah. It's like you're not even trying to understand this person. Maybe they're so excited that they're starting to move and do something for themselves. Man, I'm high-fiving them all day long. Forget about like there's something better and there's a better method and a better mechanism. Like, and I would love to see, I'm sure that it won't disappear because some of that is what drives, the arguments drive eyeballs, the like my camp versus your camp, right? That's kind of Sapolsky, right? Like it teaches us me against you. So we create this psychology, but I would love to see, more of the collaboration. That's why, like, I love getting on shows. I love talking about stuff because, I've learned, I've stood on the shoulders of giants, right? Like I've, for the last 20 years, learned from, more than that. If I look back at 13 years old, right? Like, so 30 years now,
yeah,
I've learned from some of the best people on the planet in every area. And I've spent absurd amounts of money, time and energy, traveling the world, becoming really excellent at the stuff that I do. And I'm still like every day feel like I'm dumb and I'm learning. Right. And so we go to different pockets and like, hey, I go here and learn from the nutrition and from the mobility and from the strength and from the speed and isometrics from Alex and Natera. And like, I'm buying every course left and right, learning everything, there is. And again, that's the goal, like get better at it, but make sure that like we make it accessible to people because let's look at this country. It's not healthy. It's not fit. Right. So again, for us to like argue about these minutia where really if you got into it because you really wanted to help people, man, then go back to that intent and just think about if you can get somebody to move forward, that's winning, right? And if you can support somebody that's moving forward, even though they're not doing the best and most optimal thing, that's winning.
I love that perspective, man. And that's such a huge I mean, you got my brain going to so many directions on this now because I think a lot of people in the fitness industry have become better marketers looking at like classic like copywriting text. It's like a whole other discussion. And what you see is people apply these arguments, try to pigeonhole themselves like this is my niche, this is the thing I have to stick to. This is my base. I'm going to rally it. Not too different from watching a political commercial and fight against
Yeah, for
everything
real.
else without any nuance.
Yep.
And so it just kind of comes back to it's like people cherry pick like research just to support this one thing. And again,
Yep.
it's good to be evidence based, but like if you have evidence but you don't have the art aspect of how it actually applies to a person, it's not going to suit them directly. And so like you're mentioning, man, like so much of it comes down to being able to understand the person that's directly in front of you and help apply the right thing at the right time. And if it's somebody who's just getting started, applaud that shit. Because like when I look back, when I first started getting, like when I was like 12, 13 years old, I would do the dumbest shit you can
Yeah.
imagine in the gym. I had like this folder full of like workouts like ripped out from like Muscle and Strength and all these magazines that I would like come in with this like janky ass folder and go and train and just like do 37 sets of bicep curls, even though I couldn't do a pull up, right? And so like we have to remember that we all start somewhere. And many times, even if we're starting somewhere that's maybe not ideal, we're building a habit, we're building a passion that's going to lead us down a path for knowledge. And as we all know, when somebody learns something through their experience and it feels like their idea, it's so much more likely to stick long term. And so,
100%.
listen, if somebody's doing something wrong, like and they're not safe, like be gentle about it. Just be like, hey, can I make a suggestion here? If they say no, cool, step off. If not, like chill out. It's like you got to meet people where they're at and be open minded to helping them get some support, not trying to prove your point.
And I mean, this, Alan Cosgrove said, I consider myself both a teacher and a student, right? I hopefully I will forever be a student. I don't know how long ago he said this, right? Like, think about like the teachers in your life, right? And think about the teacher that made you feel dumb and what did that do to you? And I instantly think about like, in math,
Yeah.
actually, like a teacher to this day, look, this is like, I mean, 35 years ago, something like that basically embarrassed me in class, right? In front of everybody at math. And it's like I resented, the teacher, but I resented math. Like I just started, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
started getting better at math once you put $sign in front of it, right? It took that long,
Yeah.
but and then, but then I think about another teacher that was so important in my development. Always like if I would say dumb stuff, they'd ask me questions, right? They basically be very, I don't say empathetic, but like more gentle towards it, right? More understanding. And it's like that person led me down me wanting to study more and learn more about that topic. And it was actually one of my PE teachers when I was like very, very young, right? And so the reality ends up being is like if you're a coach, but if look, I think if you're a human, you're a coach because you're coaching your kids, you might be coaching people at work. And if you look at yourself as a teacher, you have to go back and say, man, think about how you felt, and when you felt like shit, when somebody made you feel like shit, or somebody you look up to, you're like asking them a question, and maybe it's a little bit of a dumb question, and they like made you feel dumb. How did you feel?
Yeah.
Versus the person that like actually was listening to you, asked you questions, and stood as like, hey, you know, something I'd recommend, or maybe there's a little bit different approach to look at this, and they led you down a different path and really made you feel great, right? Like which one do you want to be? And I think in fitness there's a lot of the former, right, where it's like I win because I'm really smart, I make you feel stupid, right? And again, some people just don't know. I mean, look, it's really difficult, and if you're on social media, on podcasts and stuff, like, man, if you're an average person that is not into this, it's really, I mean, what do you believe, right? Like, oh, but that guy's got 1 million followers, that one's got 1 million followers, and they're both saying different stuff, and they're arguing, and like it's challenging, right? So we have to be more of teachers and get our students, excited to learn and kind of go down the rabbit hole also themselves. Like we have to educate, but then again, autonomy, right? We know that self-determination theory is three things, right? It's autonomy, meaning choice, it's competence, building skill, and it's relatedness, like community, right? So, even in training, I do so much of the first one. Hey, if I'm building a new program, which one would you like to do more? Elevated reverse lunge or a Bulgarian split squat? Oh my God, I hate Bulgarian split squats. We've done that shit. Like, I don't want to do it again. Reverse? Okay, yeah, reverse lunge. Great. What happened there? They chose it. Are they going to be more committed to the thing they choose? Absolutely. Like, I just did a video on YouTube about nutrition coaching, like very simple, like as an instaff I did, right? And it was like, hey, like basically you end up going like, hey, what do you think are some things that you could do with your nutrition to improve it? Man, like I eat out a lot. Oh, tell me a little bit more about that. Okay. And they tell
Yeah.
you, and it's like, okay, so I'm gonna circle one of those. What else? Man, like I'm having some alcohol like 4 or 5 nights a week. Okay, cool. Alcohol. Right. They tell you, and then you got like 4 different things that they say because they know themselves better than you do. And you go, which one of these do you want to attack first? Like low hanging fruit or the toughest one? And they pick one. Okay, great. Let's determine what you're going to do and how we can track this. They've been making the choice the whole time. Autonomy. Do you think that that's going to work better in coaching than if I go like, Eric, you're drinking too much. We're going to cut that down completely. That's out. Also, you'd be like, okay, but then you're not going to do it, right? Because it's not your choice.
100%.
So that's the art of coaching, which by the way, like, I mean, we could do a 2-week nonstop, conversation about the art of coaching, but the reality is like we have, this idea that we're going to beat things into people's heads so that they do them doesn't work. We know that, right? We know that. So why don't you take a different approach? And like, I know that like on social media, I try to do my best, or on podcasts, or, to not just be like, this is the way, there's no other way, but just educate and let people go down the rabbit hole, right? Provide valuable, useful content, lead people to research in other places and whatnot. But if they're doing better, to me, it's like a training session. Somebody said, Luka, what are some components of a training session that you want? And I'm like, to be safe, for them to get better, and then for them to feel good, meaning have a good experience so that they keep coming back. Because if they, first, thou shalt do no harm. That's our goal. They should never get hurt during a training session. Number 2 is, I'm like, so if I look at somebody that's got a really wacky static lunge, there's no way I'm fixing it in one go, right?
No.
It's like, I can't fix all this shit, but can I make it better? And if I made it better, that's a win. And then for them to be like, man, they could be like, man, that was really challenging or hard. Like that really pushed me, but I feel good. Like that was a good experience for me. Those are the 3 things. And then they're like, I'll be back. Cool. And then when they keep coming back for 2 years, you've changed their life. So that's that. And I look at that. I don't give a shit if it's like, I got the Cy Young Award winner. Same thing. I got Susie Sue, never touched a weight in her life. Same thing. Those are principles, right? And we got to do more of that. I think we got to do more of that, not just in person. I think we got to do more of that online. The bickering and the arguing, man, is just like, it's crazy to me, right? And psychologically, from a marketing standpoint, I understand sometimes people using that. If your intent, like, I know why I got into this industry. Like, I'm 20 years in and I still coach 25 hours a week because I love coaching. And my goal has always been like, I want to be like, world-class, top notch coach, right? So I'm going to continue to practice my craft. And I don't know how many sessions I'm at, but it's like fucking 50,000, who knows, right? Like, and the point being is, though, that it's like, if our intent was to get in because we want to help people, and that's what everybody says, then remember your intent. Like, remember your intent when you start doing dumb shit and like putting people down or arguing with folks. And look, it's different having a conversation. The amount of times that like me and Faruja, like we'll be eating and for 4 hours talking about hamstrings, hamstring exercises and like, I don't know, but it's like, but we get somewhere and we have a great time, and it happens a ton. Right. But that's different. That's debate. Again, like you brought up politics, right? We don't have that anymore. It's like, it's my side or die, right? Your side or die versus like, nah, let's debate and actually both become better out of this thing with sharing our experiences, sharing our knowledge. And I just, I will put it on myself to continue doing that, but I would really hope that there's more folks that will take that approach, because I think it's better for the people that they coach. And I think it's better for an industry. And I think it's better for, the social space.
Totally agree, especially as it continues to grow and take such a big piece in people's lives. Luka, dude, appreciate all your wisdom. Been excellent catching up. Where can we find out more about you?
Man, there's a bunch of places, but I would say Instagram. My Instagram is at Luka Hocevar. So LukaHocevar. I share a lot of stuff there. If you put in my name into YouTube, I do a lot of stuff on YouTube. I have a podcast called the Vigor Life Podcast, which is very heavily oriented towards coaches, but I think if you're a person that wants to improve, you'll enjoy it. And then my courses and workshops for coaches, and my first program for end user, it's called Athlete for Life Compound V. Hopefully people know what Compound V comes from the boys on Prime. But it's an 8-week program. It's basically part of the Athlete for Life series. That's all going to be on lukahocevar.com. And I'm sure I missed a whole bunch of other stuff, but like those are kind of like the main areas you can find me.
Awesome. Guys, make sure to check it out. If you have any questions, drop Luka a message. He's always someone who's willing to go the extra mile, give some great advice. And thank you so much for listening.
Hey, it's Eric here again. Now, there are 3 ways that I can help you look great naked. Number 1, if you want to grab a free copy of the Look Great Naked protocol to help you lose body fat without counting calories, then go to bachperformance.com/free training. Number 2, if you're a busy guy looking to build muscle, then I recommend checking out our Minimalist Muscle Blitz, which has helped over 1,000 men build muscle without living in the gym. Just go to minimalistmuscleblitz.com. The link will also be available in the show notes. Or number 3 and last, if you want to work with me directly and get the best results possible, apply at bachperformance.com/coaching to look great naked without living in the gym. Until next time, my friend,